Excellent. Friends, let's get right to it. Before we dive into this incredible story, do me a favor. If this is your first time on the channel, hit that magical subscribe button, and the bell next to it is an absolute must-have. Why? Because today we're going to unpack one of the most dramatic, tense, and crucial chapters of World War II history. We're not talking about a parade ground, polished victory weapon, but about the black, sweaty, smoky work of war. About a machine soldiers didn't love, but trusted. About a machine gun that didn't become an icon, but which, without exaggeration, saved an army at a moment when it seemed like everything was lost. And you know what? I'm waiting for your stories in the comments. Maybe your grandfathers or great-grandfathers fought with it. Let's bring this memory to life. Now, get comfortable. This will be a long but gripping tale. Do you hear that sound? No, not the rattle of a Maxim, not the screech of the coffee grinder SG-42. Do you hear the screech of tank tracks tearing through the autumn mud near Moscow? Do you hear the intermittent, hacking cough of a dying factory being evacuated eastward, blowing up its own workshops behind it? This is the autumn of 1941. This is not just a season. This is the state of mind of an entire country. This is rock bottom. Catastrophe whose scale we still can't fully grasp. The Wehrmacht is rushing towards the capital. Panic, despair, encirclements. They're losing not just land and cities. They're losing factories that made weapons. They're losing arsenals, depots, entire divisions with all their equipment. And amidst this chaos, in the mud of the retreat, the old, faithful Maxims are left behind. A machine gun from the model year 1910, water-cooled. Picture this behemoth. The gun itself incredibly heavy, plus the mount, plus the shield, plus the water in the jacket. Total weight, close to 70 kilograms. This isn't a weapon, it's an artillery piece for the infantry. What if the water freezes in winter? What if there is none in the steppe in summer? What if the jacket is punctured? That's it, a steam engine, end of firing. Production, unbelievably complex, labor-intensive, requiring high-precision metalworking. And time? There is none. There is catastrophically little time. And here begins a drama few remember. Even before the war, smart minds in the GAU Main Artillery Directorate understood. The Maxim is an anachronism. It needs replacing. And a replacement appears, the Degtyaryov machine gun, the DS-39. A breakthrough, it seemed. Air-cooled, lighter, more technologically advanced. It's adopted for service. But the front, that merciless inspection committee, delivers a verdict. Unreliable. Temperamental. It fails at the most critical moments. And you know what the command does? It makes an incredible, almost absurd decision. To remove the new DS from production and urgently, in a crash effort, return to the workshops the old, reliable Maxim. Can you imagine the level of despair? When you bring back an obviously obsolete system because the new one let you down. It's like swapping an old, glitchy, but familiar computer for a supermodern one that constantly crashes. And in the end, you sadly return to the old one. And it is at this very moment, when it seems like a dead end, in the city of Kovrov at the weapons plant, a quiet, almost underground work begins. Not by state order, not by command from above, but by the call of engineering conscience. A man named Pyotr Maximovich Goryunov works there. Not a star, not a Degtyaryov or Shpagin. A modest master, who knows lathes and metal like the back of his hand. And beside him, his nephew, Mikhail, and gunner Vasily Voronkov. This trio, without pomp or grand statements, takes on the impossible. To create a new heavy machine gun. Not for parades, not for reports, exclusively for war. For the trench, for the mud, for the frost, for the exhausted, not always literate soldier. And they perform a miracle, but an engineering miracle, not a mystical one. They base it on a principle I would call rational minimalism. What can be discarded? Complexity, extra parts, temperament. The simpler, the more reliable. First and foremost, cooling. The water jacket is a crutch. What's needed is a massive barrel that heats up slowly and can be quickly changed in battle. Goryunov does exactly that. A heavy barrel with a chrome-lined bore. Chroming is also a breakthrough. It increases barrel life many times over. A soldier carries a spare barrel, and changing it is a matter of 20 to 30 seconds. Brilliantly simple. Second, the operating mechanism. They reject complex designs. They make the bolt locking system a transverse wedge type. It's like a reliable iron deadbolt. Works in any conditions. Feeding a metal belt, simple, non-disintegrating, for 250 rounds. No frills. The design was so logical and refined that the famous weapons historian Ian Hogg would later say, "This is a rare case where the gunner has almost nothing to think about except the target." Think about that phrase. In battle, under fire, when your hands are shaking, the most important thing is for the weapon to be an extension of your will, not a puzzle. The SG-43, Goryunov's heavy machine gun, model 1943, became precisely that extension. But, friends, as in any great story, there was a tragic irony here, an Achilles heel. And this heel was not in the machine gun itself, but in its legs. You see, the new, modern machine gun was placed on the old, antiquated Sokolov mount. The same one from the Maxim, with a huge armored shield. Yes, the gun itself weighed 13.8 kilograms, quite tolerable. But assembled with the mount and shield, already around 45. Picture this. A superb engine put into a cart with wooden wheels. In defense, once dug in and set up, it was magnificent. Low profile, protective shield, fired steadily, accurately for a long time. But the war from 1943 onward was a war of offense. It was about movement. And how do you carry 45 kilograms across fields under fire? The crew, 3 men. And they literally strained themselves. And here we come to the key comparison that plagued our soldiers. The Germans had the MG-42, the coffee grinder, a universal machine gun. On a bipod, it's a light machine gun, on a mount, a heavy one. Light, mobile, with a furious rate of fire. Our SG-43 lost to it in maneuver. And this was a systemic problem. Not Goryunov's mistake, but a mistake of the system, which in its terrible rush gave the troops a new gun, but didn't give it new, light legs. Now let's look at the numbers, because they are the skeleton of this story. Rate of fire, from 500 to 700 rounds per minute. But, important point, in practice, they fired in short bursts, conserving the barrel, so the actual rate was lower. Muzzle velocity, up to 865 meters per second. That's very serious, meaning a flat trajectory, great penetrating power. Effective range, up to 2.3 kilometers. This is a weapon for controlling space. It doesn't hose an area down. It hits accurately and far. That was its philosophy. Not frenzy, but control. And this control came to the front right at the turning point, at the Battle of Kursk, the offensives of 1943 to 44. The SG-43 became the backbone of machine gun companies. It covered the flanks of advancing infantry. It was mounted on the armor of tanks and self-propelled guns for anti-aircraft use. It fired on enemy concentrations from pre-prepared positions. It was a workhorse, not a thoroughbred. And in this work, it was indestructible. Mud, dust, frost, rough handling. It endured it all and kept firing. And what about the creator himself? Tragedy. Pyotr Maximovich Goryunov, who gave all his strength to creating the weapon, died in 1943, right as mass production was ramping up. He did not see the triumph of his creation. The Stalin Prize, first class, was awarded to him posthumously. This is very symbolic and sad. Often, those who give the country the tools of victory do not live to see the victory itself. After the war, the fate of the SG-43 unfolds on a global stage. It isn't scrapped. It's modernized, becoming the SGM modernized. They make a new barrel with cooling fins, a more convenient charging handle. But the main thing, they finally give it new legs. A universal tripod mount designed by Sidorenko Malafeev appears. On it, you could fire at ground and air targets. It was lighter and more convenient. But the total weight was still significant. And in an era when the world was already ruled by the general-purpose machine gun, our doctrine still divided machine guns into light and heavy. The SGM served in the USSR until the 60s, when it was replaced by the Kalashnikov general-purpose machine gun, PK. But the story doesn't end there. Thousands upon thousands of SG-43s and SGMs spread across the world as military aid. And here, friends, the most interesting part begins. This weapon ended up in Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, Africa, Afghanistan. And you know why it was so loved in the Third World? Not because it was the coolest weapon of the 70s. No, but because it was understandable like a hammer. You could service it in the field with a minimal set of tools. It didn't require a high culture of maintenance. It forgave negligence, kept firing even when more modern systems failed from sand and lack of lubrication. In this lies its second post-Soviet calling. It became the machine gun of liberation movements, partisans, poor armies. Continued its modest but reliable service. So why didn't it become a legend on the level of Katyusha or the T-34? I think the answer lies in its very character. Legends become symbols. Breakthrough technologies, stunning effect, a recognizable silhouette. The SG-43 is not a symbol. It is a tool. It is the background. It is what the ordinary, daily, hard work of war rested on. It wasn't shown in close-ups in war films, it was part of the landscape. The enemy didn't fear it the way they feared Stalin's organs. Simply was. And in this simply was lies its greatest merit. It saved the army not with a single act of heroism, but with thousands of acts of unfailing work. It allowed them to survive the crisis of 1941 to 42, gave industry time to set up production, gave the soldier confidence in his weapon. It is the bridge between the era of the Maxim and the era of general-purpose machine guns. A bridge built in hellish conditions but still standing today. Goryunov's machine gun teaches us a simple but important thing. In a critical moment, what matters is not brilliance and innovation for its own sake, but reliability, simplicity, and timeliness. It's the philosophy of survival, the philosophy of made to work. That's the story. A story without gloss, but with truth. If you, like me, were hooked by this topic, if you feel history coming alive through the fate of a single piece of equipment, let me know in the comments. Right? What other non-heroic weapon would you like to hear a detailed story about? Your likes and comments are the best guide for me on where the channel should go next. And of course, if you're not with us yet, subscribe, because there are many more such deep, detailed, and honest breakdowns ahead. Thank you for staying until the end. Until next time on air.